Welcome to another edition of 822 News for Friday, June 11, 2021. I am Julian Cruz. This streaming service is geared to keep you informed of developing and interesting news stories affecting the Belizean society. 822 News has been created to offer an outlet and invite individuals to share newsworthy issues which impacts us all as a people. Now your news. It has been reported in the international press, and yesterday the Financial Secretary, Joseph Waite, confirmed that some of Belize's creditors have agreed to extend the grace period on a $7 million coupon payment. The payment was due in May, but will now be extended to late September. GOB will be investing that time, the grace period, to continue ongoing negotiations with bondholders for debt restructuring. The Financial Secretary explained that a 30 days grace period was acceptable when GOB did not make the May 28th payment, but if a payment was not secured within the 30 days, then the debt payment becomes what is called a hard default. A hard default means that bondholders would put a strict demand on the payee, i.e. GOB, to try to collect their money. What the Belizean administration did was to reach out to some of the bondholders to ask for an extension of this grace period by a further 90 days. This now means that the payment will become irrevocably due on the 28th of September. This is the hope that government will be allowed sufficient time for a positive outcome of the ongoing negotiations with the bondholders to achieve some degree of debt relief. As has been made known, the super bond has gone through 5 restructuring phases. With the extension of the grace period, it is hoped that the bondholders or the creditors will agree to a 6th restructuring of the ever-overbearing debt bond. And while the bond negotiators battle the economic storm on that front, Belize's foreign reserves have weathered some of the worst days ever. The Financial Secretary indicated that the nation's reserves are rebounding. He stated that the process to complete recovery will be slow, yet the economy is already experiencing growth. Here is what he had to say. The official reserves are adequate. I think we have 3.5 months of imports cover. We are hoping, we expect it to remain that way. We are beginning to see some resilience in the economy. It is going to be slow, but I think we are over the worst of it, end quote. Now keep in mind that with the fragile economic state of a devastating natural disaster, or a second hit from a COVID variant, it can send us into a tailspin, which would invariably set us back and cancel all the gains the nation is slowly making as it strives to regain economic stability. The 10% salary reduction for teachers and public officers, which came into force at the beginning of June, is even more dire than what was previously anticipated. That is, according to PSU President Dean Flowers. He scrutinized the new pay scales that have been implemented by the Ministry of Finance. The head of the Public Service Union noted the readjusted pay will set government employees back by 8 points, directly affecting their increments after the proposed 3-year period ends. Flowers also said that he was not certain that public officers are fully aware of the impact of these changes. Financial Secretary Waite, on the other hand, says the new pay scale for government workers and teachers is backed by agreements made in negotiations with the unions and legislations passed in the House. Although Public Service Union President Flowers says the scale is permanent and that increments will also be 10% less when reinstated. Waite says the issue of what will happen when increments down the road has not yet been discussed. The FinSec countered, saying that the pay scale is a consequence of the 2 pieces of legislation that were approved, whereby the scales were reduced by 10%. For officers who were earning just above $12,000, it is consistent with what was approved. He indicated that an SR was signed and was attached to the pay scale, and the act was legislated after the bill was tabled and went through the House and Senate readings. In addition to the reduction in actual salaries of 10%, there is also the freeze of increments. That was for a proposed period of 3 years. Here is the Deputy Prime Minister's, Cordell Hyde's, comments on this issue when asked about the new pay scale.
Well, I imagine the lawyers who advise the government advised that we would have to take that route, but the commitment entirely is that it's not permanent. It's for the time being. It's for the projection is 3 years, but the commitment to the unions is that we would revisit this annually to see whether we need continue with the cuts or whether we can pull back from that. Every 6 months, the union side and the government side will meet to go over the numbers, to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do. And that way, if we're not doing what we're supposed to do or we are being derailed, we can get back on track and focus on what we have to do to ensure that we meet our targets. So it's not permanent. Right. That's the job of the government, to make laws, to amend laws. So we should be doing that far more often to adapt to the times. So once it's no longer needed, then we'll revert back to whatever structure that is required.
As Joe Wade explained it, a pay scale is a critical element in actually processing the pay. If there is any change in salaries, the scale is a guide. It is almost a directive as to how the new changes will be put into effect. So anytime there is an across-the-board salary change, a new pay scale is published to reflect those changes. It is part of operating procedures. Prime Minister John Briceño on Wednesday made an official visit to San Jose, Costa Rica. PM Briceño is attending the extraordinary summit of the heads of state and government of SICA, Spain, and a solidarity event for forcibly displaced persons and host communities in Central America and Mexico in San Jose. The Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez Perez Castellón, has met with the heads of state of the countries of Central America integration system to analyze issues that impact the region's development, including climate change and irregular migration. The event is also expected to strengthen the long-standing ties of friendship and cooperation between Spain and SICA member states and commemorates SICA's 30th anniversary. During his visit, Prime Minister Briceño also held bilateral meetings with the President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado Quesada. He returns home on the weekend. We'll now go for a break and be right back with more 822 News. The International Monetary Fund has released its official report following its Article 4 consultation with Belize back in February of this year. And we alluded to that report in the first segment of the news. Among the policy points Belizeans would be most concerned about are the recommended cuts to government spending and increases in taxes, including the general sales tax. The report acknowledges Belize has been hard hit by COVID-19. The report says Belize has had one of the highest numbers of cases and deaths per capita in the Caribbean. In 2020, tourism fell by 72%. Belize's gross domestic product contracted by 14% that year, and public debt increased from 97% in 2019 to almost 130% in 2020. Because the IMF says Belize's recovery from the pandemic will be protracted with only sluggish tourism growth over most of 2021 and public debt likely to remain high, the fund says Belize's economic outlook is, quote, subject to substantial downside risks, including from a resurgence of the pandemic and natural disasters, end quote. The fund directors say there is an urgent need to restore debt sustainability, provide support to the most vulnerable, and implement structural reforms. The directors recommended broadening the tax base, strengthening revenue administration, and reprioritizing expenditures. A major priority is restoring debt sustainability to reduce external imbalances and strengthen the currency peg. They call on the authorities to limit central bank financing of the government, which together with fiscal consolidation would help reduce the current account deficit, improve access to external financing, and boost reserves. But they also call for increasing tax rates, including that of the GST. FinCEN Joe Wade commented that nobody knows for sure what the future holds. The government is putting in place what it thinks are credible and adequate goals to try to resume growth and bring our debt back to sustainable levels. We have taken difficult actions. We have reached out to our partners, including labor and the private sector, everybody working together. But it needs a sustained effort, and we are hoping that in 18 months or another 2 years, we look back in the rearview mirror and we see that we have climbed out of this hole. Prices on our commodities can sometimes be volatile, so there are a number of unknowns. But I think we are taking the correct steps to stabilize ourselves, put ourselves back in a sustainable path. And hopefully, in 3 years' time, with sustained effort, we will be able to say that we are back on solid ground, as we all wish that to be. On Tuesday evening, Mesopotamia Area Representative Shine Barrow threw more shade at Patrick Farber's leadership of the United Democratic Party. As we reported, Barrow claimed that Farber doesn't enjoy the confidence of the majority of opposition members of the House. In a social media post Tuesday evening, he went on to say that Tracy Panton enjoys the confidence of the majority of opposition members of the House. But just hours later, Panton took to her personal Facebook page to distance herself from Barrow's statements. She wrote, and we quote, "I do not associate myself with the statement of the Honorable Shine Barrow placed on social media regarding the lack of confidence in the UDP party leader, the Honorable Patrick Farber, as the leader of the opposition in the House of Representatives," end quote. Panton ended her statement saying that it's time for the UDP to unite and heal and rebel. While Barrow says an emergency meeting of the UDP National Party Council will be held before they proceed to write the Governor General, there has been no confirmation of that. Tracy Panton told the media via WhatsApp to refer to her statement on her Facebook page and that she would not be making any further comments on the matter. We'll go for a break and take a look at the weather forecast. islands in the Caribbean have begun restarting their tourism sector, encouraging international vacationers to come out of their months-long quarantine and plan their out-of-the-country travel. However, a number of governments around the world are still cautious about having their citizens travel amid the pandemic. Japan, for instance, warned its people in a recent coronavirus advisory about traveling overseas, which includes a number of Caribbean nations. The cruise lines, which have been a major contributor to the region's tourism, are still struggling to set sail. A recent report said that the trips of four of Royal Caribbean's international ships are cancelled due to shipyard closures and related issues. Professor Looney, a distinguished professor at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, who specializes in issues relating to energy security and economic development in the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, and Latin America, stated that, quote, the sharp drop in tourism stemming from the pandemic will undoubtedly plunge most Caribbean countries into severe recessions, with few resources at their disposal to cushion their populations from the fallout. The professor further stated that the perennial challenge with natural disasters have left the Caribbean extremely ill-prepared to address the economic effects of COVID-19. The islands have already been indebted for the damage incurred from the Category 5 hurricanes that visited the region in recent years. The best strategy for the Caribbean countries is to be more vigilant in curbing the virus, quote, before attempting to return to anything resembling normalcy, end quote. Further, the region's economic recovery will also depend on a combination of debt relief and concessional funding. Looney believes that in order for the Caribbean to weather its worst crisis since 9/11, 3 regional bodies must seek the help of international organizations and governments. The Caribbean Community, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and the Caribbean Hotel and Travel Association must work in conjunction with the World Trade Organization and national governments to restore trust by implementing policies and practices that assure tourists of their safety. He quoted, this means implementing more rigorous safety and hygiene standards, which will ultimately raise the cost of providing services, end quote. And while health officials here at home have been trying to encourage citizens to get their COVID-19 vaccinations to get us back on the right track, the situation in Trinidad was just the opposite this past week. Due to the state of emergency, the cumulative deaths of over 630 people caused by so many cases of COVID-19, thousands of people turned out for their free jab, overwhelming the healthcare system in that country. So Belizeans, allow us to remind you to keep those masks on, sanitize your hands as much as possible, and get your vaccine shot. They are readily available in country. Let's keep the COVID spread to a minimum. For any contributions, comments, concerns, A22 News can be reached through maxstudiobelize@gmail.com or cell number 635-1240. And please remember to subscribe to Max Studio Belize on YouTube. Remember to like our channel, and also you can follow us on Facebook. Stand up and speak through it, Belize. Until next time, have a good night.